What up, peeps? It's the Bibby here, as promised in my last snack that I was talking about, anime and manga subsequently. I would like to do a capsule review and really just talk about this anime right here. Boom. Vinland Saga. Vinland Saga is one of the more subtly loved, I guess, animes out there. I mean, it's a huge anime. The manga's massive too. Go check out the manga if you haven't already. I'm saving it for a rainy day. I can't wait to read the manga. Vinland Saga, I think, is probably the most message-driven and perhaps artistic thing that I've ever seen. The animation studio behind it, I'm going to leave the name up here, right here. I don't know the name. Incredible animation studio. The art style, the panels are just so awe-inspiring. It's insane. Like I said when I was talking about anime in my last snack, if you don't watch it, go check it out. This is absolutely one of those shows that you can just pause at any moment and view it like a painting, you know, and most of it is, if not all of it, is done by hand. There's a little bit of CGI in there. It is a stunning work of art, and probably the most juxtaposing change of character development for any main character I've ever seen in anything, which is a good thing. You know, he's on a journey, and you're following us on a journey. We're following them on a journey. You know, Thorfinn, son of Thors, is the main character that it follows. Season 1 and Season 2, there are 2 seasons out right now. So completely different seasons, you know, and if you've watched it, you'll know what I mean. It's set in the Viking Age. King Harold is conquering over England, who ultimately passes on the throne to his son Canute, who obviously historically Canute the Great becomes, you know, the first king of all of England, to unify England as one, who was Viking. Follows that kind of timeline, and it follows this boy, Thorfinn, son of Thors, who's from Iceland. And his father is this great warrior that fled the Jorms Viking to live out a peaceful life. They find him, they call him on a mission or whatever. His son sneaks out and goes with him. His father ultimately gets killed, which, this isn't a spoiler. This is like right in the first couple of episodes. This is the whole premise of the show. And he basically follows, as a young boy, I believe he was 11 when he left or something like that, maybe even younger. He follows around England the man who killed his father, learning to fighting for his father, fighting for his father's killer, learning to fight so that one day he can challenge his father's killer to a fight, and he does so along the way. Until one day he wants to eventually kill him and swears that he would avenge his father's death, which is a very dark and traumatizing thing that's really passed on. We're going to dissect each season. This is season 1, okay, because they're very different, and then we're going to ultimately come back together. Season 1 is very dark, very gory. It's very action-packed. If you love Vikings, if you love medieval combat, it's the show for you. There's raiding, there's pillaging, you know, which, you know, take what you want from that. There's wars, there's love, there's anger, there's hatred. It's a whole slew of emotions. Dude. And it's beautifully done. It's, you know what I think it is about Vinland Saga? Well, season 1 and 2, it's so poetic, and it's so visually poetic too. You know, it'll jump back and forth, and Vinland Saga is one of those few animes. I think Attack on Titan does this quite well too, but not to the extent that Vinland Saga does. They really use scenery, the environment as a character, which we've talked a lot about here on Poet Warriors, which we ourselves have done with our upcoming movie. They really let the landscape speak for itself. Of course, it's artistically drawn landscape, it's still animated. But they really use the landscape as the character, and I'm not going to give anything away from season 1, but it's like the spiral of the character that sets up season 2. It's very, very, very intense, very constant. It doesn't really drop. Very cool, very cool. The characters are great. Most of the characters of season 1 aren't that important. In fact, the other Thorfinn's counterpart, the other main character of Vinland Saga, doesn't come in until season 2. Very adventurous season 1. It's a very, very good watch. Now, completely juxtaposing season 1, there's season 2. Which in and of itself is also just incredible, even more poetic, very less action. It's a completely different show, season 1 to season 2. Thorfinn takes up, this isn't really a spoiler, but if you care about maybe spoilers, then skip ahead. Thorfinn becomes a pacifist, and basically becomes what is deemed by the show a true warrior, who is a warrior that does not fight unless absolutely necessary. He basically, season 1, I won't give away too much, but it ends with him being sold off as a slave. And he finds himself working on this farmland, working for other Vikings, treated fairly well, but he's got to tend the land, which is a very hard manual labor job, which he doesn't seem to care about. He's so broken after the events of season 1 that he actually likes this. He likes this life of solitude, his life of silence, and then he finds and meets the other main character, whose name is Einar, who is a slave who's been traded from pillaging in England, and they become friends, brothers. Thorfinn becomes a pacifist, as I said, where ultimately he lets people beat on him, he lets someone cut his ear off, and he's just standing there taking it all. At this point he's a young man. It's 16 years after he left Iceland. So he'd been warring that whole time until these final 4 years. He's been, it takes place 4 years after the events of the end of season 1, where he's the slave, and he's hard as nails, and they depict him as a true warrior. And this is why I wanted to talk about this show ultimately, and why I wanted to talk about season 2, is their take on violence. The whole show's take on violence is unspeakably powerful and moving. Unspeakable. I can't even put it into words for you. I said season 1 is poetic. Season 2 might as well just be literature. You could read this with no manga, no anime. You could just read this, no pictures, no nothing. And be so incredibly moved by it. They facilitate it through the turmoil and the anguish of Thorfinn and, his inner struggle, his strife. He gets this vision where he's knocked out, and he sees certain comrades and certain people he didn't like in a depiction of hell, which is actually Valhalla, which is obviously seen as the Viking heaven. And that episode was so beautifully twisted and depicted and creative in my mind. That was my favorite episode, was they took the depiction of a warrior's heaven and made it hell and turned it into Thorfinn's hell, which ultimately ended up in his own self-vow to never take another life again, and to never pick up his arms again. And he seeks out, I can't even put this into words for you guys, he seeks out the peaceful resolution regardless of how many men, how many swords are at his throat. It all culminates into this war on the farm where, like, the king wants to come and take the farm. Thorfinn doesn't participate in this war. He's trying to save another slave that gets brutally injured with Einar, and it ultimately culminates in, again, like, not too spoilery, he wants to talk down the king, which isn't his duty to do. He's a slave on the farm, but he wants to repay the kindness that the slavers have actually been to him by ending the war and ending the bloodshed. So he goes to try and see the king, who is somebody he knows from season 1. And they won't let him, so then they make a wager that if he can take 100 punches, they'll let him speak to the king. And so he's there, taking these 100 punches, whilst everybody around him is just in awe, like, what is going on? Like, what is he doing? And he's just there tanking 100 punches for the slave owners, because nobody deserves bloodshed. And, there's, like, this one line he says where one of they find him there, and they're like, what are you doing, this isn't your fight, you're not a representative of the slave, of the farm. Another one's like, oh my god, he's doing this for us, like, this isn't his fight, like, why is he doing this? And he's saying, like, and then he asks Thorfinn, like, why are you doing this? And he's saying, like, because, we can try and end this bloodshed with a conversation. And he turns around and he says, if this could have been ended with a conversation, we never would have started in the first place. And he goes, like, can you honestly say, like, in your heart of hearts, did you even really try? And he says, you responded to their swords with swords and said, what if there's another way? And the guy's just standing there, like, speechless, and he does the, oh, like, he does the anime, oh. It's very, very moving, very poetic. And when we're talking about impactful art, the world needs to see Vinland Saga. The world is filled of corruption and hatred and anger and violence, so much violence in the world right now. I've always, I would consider myself a good human being. I've always considered, weighed pros and cons of violence and, and war, when should you, when shouldn't you? I don't really think there's much point in any of it, but this show raised so many points that I've never even considered, and I've never heard anybody else mention. And they used Thorfinn as a catalyst to explain this, and the entertainment to explain this. And, like, it's all set up beautifully by the hodgepodge of emotions and war from season 1 to just juxtapose season 2 and make it stand out even more. Speechless. I can't explain it to you guys. I really can't. The world needs to watch Vinland Saga. You need to watch Vinland Saga, even if you don't like that kind of thing. The message it delivers and the way of which it does it is beautiful and inspiring. Go check out Vinland Saga. You will not be disappointed.
Tasty.